And without further ado, I am going to give the floor to Anu Smalley. So please go ahead. I'll take it away.
Thank you very much. I am going to share my screen. So hopefully what you're saying is my PowerPoint presentation. Um, I have a few slides. The conversation for today is gender parity in the Agile community. So let me tell you a little bit about myself, the topic, and where the inspiration comes from. So, so my name is Anu Smalley, and my inspiration for this talk are those two beautiful girls you see on the screen. Those are my daughters. The sad part is, as women, we have seen a lot of bias and no parity in the communities we work in. And the World Economic Forum does these surveys every year. And what they found out this year in their survey was, in my lifetime, or we will not see gender parity. I started doing this research in the hope of something my 19-year-old asked me, and I started looking up, doing some research for her. And that's what led to this whole study and research and saying, I know I will not see gender parity, but maybe I can start a spark that will see gender parity for my grandchildren. I'm hopeful that by then somebody else will have enough members in the community to jump in. So efforts to bring in gender equality have come a long way, right? There's so many campaigns happening out there, and it is really amazing to see our young girls getting out there in education and sports and being a scrum master, being a product owner, being a technology person. And it's amazing to see more young girls getting into there. But my hope is the same as what Sheryl Sandberg once said, that in the future there will be no female leaders. They will just be leaders. I hope to have, I hope to do something that to leave behind a world for my daughters where they don't have to say, I'm a woman, I'm a female. They're just going to say, I'm a Java developer or I'm a leader without having the female word in front. So gender parity is step one to the ideal world. So let me walk you through some definitions and what I mean by this. So in the first image that you see, it is assumed that everybody will get the same benefits because everybody got the same set of box to stand on. That's your equality. Everybody is being treated equally. But that is now bringing in parity. The second image says now we've given more to one individual and less to another individual. So is that parity? They are being treated differently because of their sizes or of their height. Is the third image that we want to get to, where systematically we are removing the reason for why this inequality exists. The reason this inequality exists is because of that fence. So, what can we do as a society to shift the way so that we can remove the barrier? So, it's not equality, it's not parity. Now we're shifting more to equity. That is my hope and my wish for my children and for your children and for future generations to come. So, this is where we started. This was my daughter brought me this picture and said, so what does this mean? And this is the picture image that started my whole journey into doing research around this. So every year there are lots of studies that are done. McKinsey and Company does a study every year called Women in the Workplace. The UN does study every year called Women in the Workplace. And of course, the World Economic Forum does their annual report on gender parity, gender equality. And this is what we found, that this year is actually very crucial, particularly in North America. The choices we make today will have consequences for decades in the lives of our children. So let me share some data that we discovered with McKinsey and Company on their when they did their study. These are the facts that they've discovered along with some solid data. And this is global. This is not just US. This is global data. Women make up half the world's population, but we contribute only to 37% of the global GDP. 37%. We make up half the world population. Imagine what we could do if more women had the opportunities to step in and do more. $12 trillion could be added to the global GDP by 2024 if this gender gap can be narrowed. 12 trillion. That is equal to the GDP of Japan, Germany, and UK combined. Let's sink that in for a moment. The combined GDP of Japan, Germany, and UK by 2024. 195 million fewer women than men are literate. 190 million fewer women than men have access to even open an account in a financial institution. Women spend 3 times more on unpaid care work than men do. 90% of the CEOs in S&P 500 companies are promoted or hired from line roles, and women are only 20% of these line roles. It will take more than 100 years to reach gender equality based on in the C-suite, based on what's happening on these current trends. Over 100 years to get equality for women in the C levels. And finally, less than 50% of employees believe that their company is doing anything to improve on the diversity with regard to gender parity. These are solid, cold, hard facts. This is what scared me into doing more work around this topic. Right. So I have a little question for you. Which country do you believe has the smallest gender gap? So I'd like you to take a couple of seconds, and type your answer into the chat window on your Zoom window. Which country do you think has the smallest gender gap? Japan, Norway, China, Sweden some more, Iceland, Denmark, Finland, Denmark, Sweden, Israel, Germany. Who had said? Tim Brook. Iceland it is. Iceland has maintained the #1 spot for the last few years running. And if you look at this data, right, you see where the percentage is. This is how much they're closing, percentage in closing in the gender parity. Iceland has closed almost 88%, 88% of the gender parity. And it's been the top in the countries that have attained gender parity or close to 11 years running. So what this means is in Iceland, whether it's a man or a woman, or person identifying as a male, person identifying as female, regardless, you get paid the same amount of money for the same job that you do. You have the same opportunities to apply for jobs. You have the same opportunities to get into senior level positions. 11 years in the running. And if you look at this data here, the most improved countries are Ethiopia, Albania, Mali, Mexico, and Spain. They actually moved up big time on the list. It was fascinating to see some of the data that as we were doing research. The World Economic Forum has some amazing data. If you're interested, I would highly recommend you go dig into that. Here's some more data. We looked at, the World Economic Forum looked at the percentage of women on companies' boards of directors. Which countries have more than one third of the board of directors as women? Again, you see France, Iceland, Norway coming up there. And I know this data, I can suddenly see that I can't really read the data, right? It's a little weird in my eyes too. So France is number one. 43% of companies in France have women over one third of boards of directors. When I did this research, I expected the US to be up here, and sadly, we were not. No, I know. It was depressing. It was seriously depressing. The other data is which countries have one fifth of are in the board of directors, one fifth are women. Here you see the United States is at 21%. So 21% of companies in the US have one fifth of their boards of directors are women. 21%. And this is looking at, just all across the US, any company that is sharing that information. So obviously these are all public companies and not the private companies where they may not have been able to get this data. So this is the data that actually should scare us a bit. Right? So how did we get to this? This is what we're going to look at. One more question for you, right? So gender parity, when we look at gender parity, we're looking at years, how many years will it take to get to gender parity? Which region do you think, region in the world, right? So is it North America, South America, Latin America, Asia, whatever? Which region in the world do you think is closest to gender parity? We have, again, chat window. Just type it in the chat window. Scandinavia, Europe, Europe, Scandinavia. Lots of Scandinavia, Europe, or more specifically, Northern Europe. Scandinavia, North America. Pepe, you make my heart smile, but sadly, no. Africa. All right, let's look at the data. Western Europe is the closest. Western Europe will require 54 years to achieve gender parity. So let's keep looking at some of the data. Latin America and the Caribbean will need 59 years to gender parity. This is based on the assumption that the decisions that are being made will continue this way and not regress. 71.5 years in South Asia. 95 years in sub-Saharan Africa. 107 years in Eastern Europe and Central Asia. Where is North America, one might ask? 140 years for the Middle East and North Africa. 151 years for North America. And the last one is 163 years in East Asia and the Pacific. This data should scare us, specifically when we look at the fact that we could add 12 trillion GDP in the world if we can change these numbers. Time to move. Michelle, you're spot on. It is time to move. It is time to do something. Right. So I have one more data for you, and then I'm going to jump into something else. So this is again from McKinsey and Company. This is their data from 2020, the study that they did, which is women in workplace. And these reports are readily, freely available to everyone. So they looked at from 2015, they looked at the data to see where in the pipeline are women being well represented. So if you look at it, so the column A is entry level, column B is manager, C is senior manager director, D is vice president, E is senior VP, and F is the C suite. So if you look at it, entry level, 2015, we had about 45% of the women were represented. And today, it's just moved up 2% to 47. The C-suite was represented by 17% women in 2015, and today it's gone up to 21%. I will take every single percentage we've gone up, but we need to do more. We need to shift more. So the most common perception of this data is, well, women need to break the glass ceiling. Right? That's the term we hear the most. The glass ceiling, this is a term that was used in the 60s to talk about how this invisible systemic barrier that women have to break to get across, to get past, to achieve the highest levels in organizations. But that is not our problem. Our problem is something called the broken rung. You cannot get to the top rung of the ladder if you cannot step on the first rung of the ladder. You cannot get to the C-level suite if you do not have entry-level positions. If women are not allowed, not promoted to those line roles. Remember, we looked at that data where 80% of C-suite positions are promoted from line roles. This broken rung is what stops women from getting into those line roles. So that's what we need to fix. How do we get more women into the first level of management? For every 100 men promoted, right? Think about every 100 men that were promoted at the basic managerial level. How many women do you think were promoted for every 100 men? Let's make a guess. Back to the chat window. 10 for every 100 men, 10, 22, 20, 12, 1. Nancy, good answer. 50, 15, 20, 75. 50, 45. Bill, you're actually quite close. For every 100 men that were promoted, there were 72 women who were promoted. Right? For every 100 men. So what this means is if we can get, and this data is purely North America, the United States of America, right? If we would make this equal, that means for every 100 men, we would have 100 women promoted. So we would need to narrow that gap down. We would have 1 million more women in management positions in corporate America in the next 5 years. Fix the broken rung. That's what we need to work on. So that's the data. That's the problem we are facing. Whether it's in an agile community, agile organization, non-agile organization, the issue is the same. And yes, Phyllis, the numbers are even lower for BIPOC and for women of color. Absolutely. And I actually removed some of the data here because there was just so much data. I was in data heaven trying to figure out which graphs to pull in here. So I had to stop at some point. But check out the numbers on these reports. They are just absolutely astonishing numbers. So here's what I've in my research, here's what I found. Um, every organization, we can do 5 things to figure out how to fix that broken rung and then ultimately fix the pipeline, right? Because if we want to get more women up there, and I saw that comment about when we had the multiple years graphs, that it might as well have been one graph. Exactly. So, how do we change that? Here are 5 things every company should be doing. And for us in the Agile community, we actually have a shot because we have leaders who are thinking with the organization in mind, who are thinking about the people first. So, here are 5 things I believe organizations can do to fix that broken rung. One, set goals for getting women into first level management. About a third of the companies that I came across in my research, about a third of those companies actually have goals for getting women into C level or executive vice president, senior vice president levels. We need to get more goals into getting women into that first level of management, that bottom rung. How do we get them into there? In schools around the country, around the world today, there's STEM happening, right? To bring more young girls into technology and engineering and mathematics. We need to continue that movement into that first level of management. Set goals for hiring more women into the first level of management. Require diverse slates for hiring and promotions. We, we are looking for more diversity of ideas, diversity of thought. This is where we want to consider how can we bring in um, more women into the first level positions so that our candidate pool can be bigger. How do we make sure that um, we have at least 2 women in every candidate pool when we're looking for interviews? I'll tell you one thing. As an agile consultant, I work with many of my clients in helping them interview for Scrum Masters. I don't see too many women in those positions. I don't see enough resumes that are not female, that are not women of color. And being a woman of color, I think it's so important to bring that diversity of thought in here. So require more slates. Unconscious bias. Now there's pros and cons to this. I've read studies that say unconscious bias training done by non-colored people for colored people makes no sense. But I believe if you do unconscious bias for training for our interviewers, our evaluators, I believe it can actually have a lot of value in here. I can tell you, I went through unconscious bias training years ago. I came to this country 30 years ago as an immigrant, and over the course of my career, I've I've had unconscious bias towards other people, stereotypes that I learned, and I actually had to deal with them, go through some unconscious bias training of my own to put aside my own biases. So I think this is absolutely important. Establishing clear evaluation criteria. We need to ensure that whether it's without exception, candidates for the same role should be evaluated using the exact same criteria, nothing else. And employees need to be empowered to surface bias in the moment. So as an employee, if you feel that your organization has a bias against you for promotion, you should be able to speak up. So how do we create an environment like for that? And then finally, we need to put more women in line for the step up to manager positions. So we have young women joining organizations. How do we mentor them? How do we build? How do we create those building blocks so that we have leadership training, we have sponsorship, we have high profile assignments, we have mentors set up for them? I know for a fact that I got to where I am in my career because I had amazing mentors along the way. And I shudder to think about what would happen if I did not have some of those mentors. Right? My goal now is I'm mentoring up to 12 people. I have a mentoring circle, and I'll talk more about that at the very end. But that's my goal, to bring in more women of color into the Agile community. How can we do that? And not just from the US, from around the globe, because we need that diversity of ideas. So, what can you do? You, as a scrum master, as a product owner, as a team member, as a team manager, as a leader in an organization, our job is now to create an environment where we don't have to talk about this stuff again in another year. So, culture becomes absolutely critical. Changing the numbers is not enough. We need to have companies shift their culture. And you guys have heard Richard talk a million times about culture, I'm sure. He is one of the biggest proponents of creating the culture in our agile community about creating culture that supports agility. So we need to make sure we can now add to that culture by creating gender parity, make it open for gender parity. So there are three foundational elements here: equal opportunity and fairness. We want to make sure that every employee has the same opportunity, regardless of whatever gender, race, religion, color, geography, doesn't matter. We need to provide work life flexibility, especially nowadays. All of us are at home. Our kids are home, our spouses are home, our parents are home, our siblings are home. We need to figure out how to create that environment so that we can allow women to step up. Since COVID started, about 60% of the people who've actually quit positions are women. 60% of the people who have quit their jobs because they now need to go stay at home and take care of home and family, which is absolutely critical for our community and our society now. But 60% of that number are women. And we need to create a safe and respectable workplace. Um, there's just so much we can talk about this given everything that's happening in the world with the Me Too movement and the work against all the work we're doing for racial equality. It's just, we need to continue to make this happen. How do we make sure? I want my daughters to be able to walk into corporate America and not have a single fear that they are not going to be treated safe, that they are not going to be protected. That's my goal. My mother once told me, when you become a mom, you will change the way you think. And I laughed at her. I wish my mom was around here to tell, so I could tell her, yep, not laughing. And absolutely. And David, I can tell you one thing. The only reason I am able to do what I do is because my husband supports me. My husband, in our family, my husband is the stay at home father. He took care of my kids while I was traveling. He takes care of the house. Without him, I would now be here talking to you guys. So, absolutely. I don't think you can fix gender parity without our amazing men. So, I please don't ever assume that this is about men are not needed. We cannot fix this without everybody. We all need to work together. So, here are my takeaways for an agile team: Scrum Masters, product owners, team members. Let's look for equal opportunity. How do we get to that cross functional team? I still remember an instance where a scrum master, this was years ago, I had a scrum master who told me, um, was I sure I wanted to do some coding? The answer was no, I don't want to do coding. But the fact that he asked me and didn't ask the guy sitting next to me, that is what we need to change. If you're going to make people cross functional, ask, let's make sure we can truly have a cross functional team. Let's make sure everybody on the team has the opportunity to learn the most complex of languages. How do we create psychological safety? I recently worked with this amazing young woman in Europe who was doing a talk for the first time for the Women in Agile conference, and she brought up this concept of Ubuntu, which is a South African term that says "I am because we are." And I thought that was just so beautiful. The idea of I am because we are, for me, that speaks about psychological safety. How do we build the psychological safety for everyone so that we can step up, so that we can speak up? We need to encourage and empower. We need to make sure more young women are stepping up. I have a quick story about this. So, my younger daughter is an artist. She's my right right brain child who thinks about, everything is colored, there's no black and white, it's all rainbow colors. And anything that takes her older sister 3 seconds to say, she will take 10 minutes because she gets lost in flowery images. Her best friend is a guy who actually pointed her to her abilities and her brilliance in painting, drawing, and her eye for photography. We missed it as parents. I missed it because I thought, she's just playing. I completely missed it. It was her friend, this young man who saw this amazing creativity in her. And I'm so grateful that he empowered her to just step up. Right? Coaching and mentoring. Let's help people understand why we are here. The whole idea of, I'm stuck on this whole idea of, let's look at this as it's not a scarcity idea. Let's look at this as it's an abundance. The whole idea of, if there's no space at the table, increase the table. Don't let people squeeze themselves in or anything. Just make the table grow bigger. Multiply the pie. This amazing lady who taught me this whole I am because we are. Her program was, let's multiply the pie. Let's not say there's not enough to go around. Let's multiply the pie. So let's coach and mentor so that we can help the next generation step up and fill in the blanks where we couldn't. Let's make sure we have a sustainable pace. Uh, like I said, we've had 60% of people who quit jobs since March in the US have been women. I've had friends and colleagues and family members with young babies who've who've made a decision to say, my income, my husband's income, he makes more, so it makes more sense for him to stay. I'll stay home because that brings us more income. And they've made decisions like that. But I wish we didn't have to. I wish we could create an environment where we could truly find that sustainable pace and say, we're focused on outcome, not output. I don't need you to work every day 8 to 5. How can we how can we make sure that we are allowing people to work when they can so that it can be sustainable for them, not sustainable as defined by the organization, sustainable pace as defined by the individual. Let's figure out how to get flexible schedules. Again, I've had in my company, I've had people who've said, "Hey, I can't do this during the daytime. Can I work in the weekend? Can I work in the evenings?" Whatever works for you. We just need to get this done. I don't care whether you're logging in at 9 o'clock and logging out at 5, immaterial to me. Work whatever you want so that you can be happy, so that you can bring joy to yourself and to your family and to your work. And lastly, have empathy. The world is going through a crazy time right now. The US, crazier. It doesn't matter whether the person you're speaking to, the person you're coaching, the person you're working with believes in something completely different than you. Just approach each other with kindness. Different is not wrong, different is not bad. Let's start with that and help each other out. If we can work with empathy, I have hope for my children's world. I I had somebody tell me the other day, I spoke to somebody who is completely believes in opposite things to me. We had a 5-hour conversation. And for the first time in a year, I had a beautiful conversation with this person. It was not about you're different, hence you're bad. It was just how can we work together? So this person is going to work with me in my mentoring circle to help women move forward. Just because I empathized, empathy doesn't mean agreement, it just means I hear you. So how can we connect? How can we hear each other? How can we have compassion? That's what the world needs right now. If we have any hope to make this world a better place for our children, we need to start with this slide. So, what will you do to help? That is my question for you. So I'd love to hear some ideas. Chat, uh, chat window would be great. What do you think you can do to help with this? See a bunch of things here. I love that. I love that what you've said, David. Women pushing themselves into the circle often is a dangerous move. Absolutely. There's so much happening in our world today that can go either way. Again, we start with empathy, we start with compassion. Support everyone. Absolutely, Bill. Support everyone. We need everybody to be supported so that we can get to gender parity. It's not just supporting women, but we need to open doors, empower women so that they don't fear strong, empower men so they don't fear strong women. Be empathetic, help other women not be threatened. The biggest threat to women are other women, unfortunately. In order to help, I need to understand the dimension of the problem in our industry. Are women represented in Agile roles or not? Actually, they're not. The Women in Agile Conference did a big survey a few years ago, and they discovered that for every every 10 Scrum Masters who are men, only 2 are women. Product owners, there's a little more equality there. There are more women product owners. There are fewer dev team members. At least this was the case 4 years ago. But since then, they've been doing a lot of work in that area as well. Ask women what they need, mentor, sponsor. Um, love the ideas here. Love the ideas here. Um, So my favorite woman leader in the last few years the first prime minister in the world to have dealt with a major terrorist attack, a volcano erupting in her country, and a pandemic. And she did all of this while holding a baby in her arms. She gave birth to a child after she became the Prime Minister of New Zealand, Jacinda Ardern. She's she's one of my heroes. Um, Not too many women I've seen have it all, uh, but if you hear Jacinda speak, she will say the only reason she was able to do all of this stuff was because she had amazing support from her partner, who helped her with everything, who supported her, who helped her move forward with everything she needed to do. So that's my final thought for the day for you guys. Thank you very much for listening to me. Um, this is passionate for me because, like I said, I started off the talk with this is for my daughters. Um, so, little information about me and what I'm working towards with this. As I said, uh, I am doing my share, attempting to do my share. So, I'm a certified Scrum trainer in the Agile community, and I own my own Agile consulting company. I do a lot of work there. My what I noticed also was in the Agile community that we have a group for certified scrum trainers and certified coaches. The diversity in that group sucks because there is none. I remember sitting around in a group of certified trainers and coaches a few years ago, and I just looked around the room. Out of the 50 people in that room, there were four women, and there was one person of color. That was me. For me, my goal is I want to increase diversity. I want to increase people of color. I want to increase more women at that level. So I'm actually running a mentoring circle for people who are looking to come become certified scrum trainers and certified coaches. And out of the 13 people in there, 12 people, 10 are women, two are white men, because I believe we need them as well in the mix. I need to hear their voices as much as the other voices. And Lucy, who's in the call here, is one of those people in my group. My goal is to get more of you into that community. So if there's anything I can do to help, please reach out to me. My contact information is there. Connect with me at LinkedIn. I honestly believe leadership is a team sport. If we have a hope to lead our Agile community towards gender parity, towards a global diversity, we need to work as a team. I am happy to help with any way you need. If I can't help you, I will connect you to people who can. That's my goal for 2021. That's my promise to you for 2021. I want everybody to join me in whatever way, shape, or form. If you have an idea, come talk to me. I'll connect you to people who can make your idea happen. That's my promise to you. So, uh, uh, so again, um, wait, I forgot. That's the reason I do this. My girls, right? That's an older picture, but don't tell them I showed their picture on a slide into the world. They will never forgive me, but what they don't know won't kill them. And then finally, before I get to this, I have a request from Agile New England. Please, 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 your feedback is important. This, I believe, is the last meetup for 2020. Feedback, as you know, inspect and adapt is what the Agile community thrives on. So please provide feedback to the organizers so that they can continue the amazing work they're doing. Thank you very much for being here. I'm here for any questions you may have. David, that's a great thing. I don't believe we can have quotas for every kind of diversity. So for me, that's why when I first started with, we need to bring more women in, and then I said, well, how about other diversity? What else can I do? So I started off by saying, okay, my mentoring circle, I'm only going to mentor two people. That was the beginning of this year, and then as more people came, I couldn't say no. So now I'm up to 12 people, and I have a feeling that's going to become a full-time job sometime soon. So
I think
Hi,
going back to your first slide, though, the point is to get rid of the need for quotas by eliminating the what's
yeah,
causing that imbalance, not compensating.
exactly. Exactly. Because I hear from women and I ask women, so why aren't you continuing your journey onto a scrum master, agile coach, whatever? They go, there's too much travel involved. I can't do that. So there is some systemic um, things in their ways. So how can we remove those? I can't solve every problem alone, but I have people like Lucy on my in my group who I'm hoping will help us remove some of those biases and remove some of those big systemic problems that exist in the society.
hi, Anu. Just want to thank you for your presentation. It was great. I really appreciate it. I'm very familiar with that McKinsey study.
Yeah.
Outside of being a project manager and scrum master, also I'm a commissioner with the Massachusetts Commission on the Status of Women.
Ah,
So I was very interested in hearing this presentation because we know that, as you quoted, there was recently a Boston Globe article. We actually, with the commission, did
yes.
did a survey of 4,000 women, and that information that you shared, those numbers that you shared, is definitely correct. We're seeing women leaving the workforce now because they don't have adequate child care, they don't have the support, and of course that falls disproportionately on women of color. And so I just wanted to thank you for this presentation and for what you're doing with the mentoring circle. I know every time I walk into an organization as a project manager and scrum master, I am the only person of color.
Yeah.
Um, and sometimes I'm even the youngest, and I'm in my 50s, so that's kind of strange. But I love this group. I know all of you. Hi, David. Hi, everybody. You know,
Oh,
I've been a part of this group, Amy, forever. And we have a great group here and great people here. So I know everybody is very receptive to this. So I just want to thank you for
oh,
the work that you're doing.
oh, thank you. This I'm for me, like I said, I started my mentoring circle because I had two women who had asked me for help, and I said sure. And then my daughter asked me this question, and I started digging into this data. I'm like, oh my god, I got to do more. I got to do more. And now I spend like once a month we get together in our group every on a Saturday. I have them practice training, and it's just amazing. I love what I do, and my ask for each one of them is when they get their certification, that they go start another mentoring circle. That's what I ask. I don't need anything else in return, except a guarantee that they will mentor at least one person.
Anu, I wanted to pick up on your comment about systemic obstacles.
Yes.
Um, it's um, it's reasonable that people have different aspirations. Not everybody wants the same things out of life, and it's also reasonable that there could be um, differences in aspirations by gender. Uh,
Hmm.
so, I guess I'm surprised at your apparent assumption that everybody wants the same type of career path. Perhaps some of the choices that women are making are they're making because that was their choice.
Oh, 100%. I agree with you. One of I my mother was a stay-at-home mom. I'm eternally grateful for the choices she made. I Every person who comes to me with a help, I am not the one to push them into a career that they don't want. As a coach, I've talked women out of a career sometimes because I felt that best thing for them at that time was to be at home and take care of their family. everyone makes a choice. All I ask is we support the choices they make. If 60% of women are leaving organizations because they're making a choice, hallelujah, hallelujah. But if they're leaving because they have no choice and this is the only option because of the obstacles in front of them, then we owe it to them to do something about it.
I fully agree. Thank you.
Yep.
One thought, I have a question that one of the key roadblocks that I see, and you mentioned it, is often the woman, the unspoken idea that it's the woman who needs to take care of the children or of the parents. And while I was waiting to ask that question, I was intrigued when Phyllis, in discussing a barrier, said, yeah, and that all those women who wind up needing to leave a job to take care for children. And I was thinking, oh, you mean there's not a lot of men who leave the job to take care of children? So there it was, the unspoken idea. And I'm wondering, how do you do that for your mentees and other women to bring it that they don't have to be the ones who quit their career for the kids or their parents?
So for me, I tell them my story. I didn't quit my job. I didn't stop traveling. As a matter of fact, I traveled for 8 years every week on the road while my husband was at home.
Mhm.
My kids are pretty smart. They're pretty cool. They grew up just fine. They had a parent's love. Um, they had me as much as I could be, but I wanted the career more than my husband wanted a career. And that was a choice we made together. And I am glad to stand up there as a role model for my daughters. Now, I'll tell you, one of my daughters says she wants to do what I do, travel, have a career. The other one says, "Nah," which is great. They both are individuals, they're making their own choices, and that's great. For me, um, whenever, like I said, I'm also a very practical person. I had one mentee who was who made a choice to leave her job because her husband made more money than she did. Now that itself is an obstacle. If that obstacle was removed, if both of them made the same amount of money, what choices would be possible? It's just, we can't solve the problem overnight or
I-
here. It's,
I'd like to comment here.
yes.
And again, I think it's up to us men to also step up. I made more money than my wife did at the time. When I stayed home and was a stay-at-home dad, I volunteered to do it because I saw value in it. Spending time with my daughters, what a great opportunity in my life. Far more rewarding than the money. My wife makes substantially more than me now, and I'm very proud of her.
Yes.
Very
And my
proud of her.
husband, David, my husband would say the exact same thing you just said. And let me tell you, my younger child, she has a mean football arm as well. Right.
I was a ballet dad, so
See?
my kids took a different path.
The older one is a ballet dancer. The younger one throws a mean football and can wrestle you to the ground. So I got one of each. What other questions do we have?
So if I can, one thing I wanted to mention, I mentioned earlier in chat, I was in a group for a while. It doesn't exist anymore, for hiring managers to focus on, how we can improve as hiring managers. And we had this very long, deep meeting on diversity. And one of the questions that came up was like, well, yeah, there's a lot of great concepts and everything like that, but what specifically action items can we do You know,
Mm.
how can we affect these changes? And that's a harder question, but some of the answers that came out were very easy to take care of. And that is um, changing how the company talks about its culture
Mm-hmm.
and talks about what it's offering its employees.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, you'll find a lot of jobs that will say, oh, you know, we have our barbecues, you know, one barbecue a month, and we have the foosball table in the kitchen, and you know, all this, you know, uh, essentially like guy stuff. Not that
Yeah.
women don't like that kind of stuff, but it's not focused on things that matter
Yeah.
equally to all people.
Absolutely. And as you were talking, David, I remembered an instance. This is years ago, pre-Agile days. I was leading an IT organization, and my boss, the CIO, he was a man, of course, and he said, "Hey, we may need to go on a trip." I'm like, "Okay, we have to go revisit this customer." I'm like, "Sure." And I said, when? He said, it'll probably be sometime next week. And I said, okay, cool. And this is Monday. And I'm saying, Wednesday came along. He hasn't responded. I'm like, dude, are we going or are we not going? Because I don't really know. We'll probably decide Sunday night. I'm like, we can't decide Sunday night. I have kids. I have school lunches. You, he goes, oh, my wife handles all of that. I'm like, no shit. I handle all of that with my husband. So I need you to make a decision before the weekend starts. And he was like, I've never had this problem before. I'm like, well, you've never led a woman before, have you? So I'll make a decision. And that's the thing. It was just, it didn't even occur to him that that could be an issue.
So I want to play on what David said, because as you were talking, David, I started thinking we have the concept of being agile versus
Yeah.
doing agile, right? There's the concept of now being diverse versus doing diversity.
Mm.
Because when I see a company's website saying how diverse the culture is or everything, and then you look at the executive suite and it's all
Yep.
white men,
Yep.
that tells me a lot about the company.
Yep.
So I think there are a lot of companies like that right now.
Oh,
I'm
tremendous.
an old white dude, and I always look at the executive pages for
Nothing
for,
against
for
that,
that
David.
diversity. No, yes, something against it. You know, even as an old white dude, I value that diversity, and I see the correlation that they talk about of, you know, diversity in the levels of management and how successful the company is, and how likely it is that that's the kind of company that I want to be.
Yeah. And don't get me wrong, my husband's an old white dude, and I like my old white dude. So, yeah, just
We
saying.
have our purposes.
Yes, absolutely. And we love you for that.
Actually,
And I wanted to add to that too, because I think, Michelle, you really hit on a really good point, because it's not just about recruiting and
Mhm.
hiring, but it's also retention and
Yes.
promotion.
Hmm.
Because I have seen in many times where, there's a big push to recruit people, but they can't retain them
Right.
because the environment is not even conducive to a person being able to stay. As I mentioned, many times I am the only person that looks like me in the room. And
Hmm.
that there are challenges with that. Even though I live in the suburbs and I
Yeah.
make six figures and I'm very well educated, there's still challenges with that. So I think also just creating an environment where people, I think you mentioned Anu, where there's not that scarcity mentality, there's
Yeah.
abundance mentality,
Yeah.
and where we just are open to
Yes.
people's difference.
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
I just wanted to share that and build on to what Michelle and David were saying.
Thank you, Phyllis.
um, actually, I know I have a great anecdote to tell about a recent, job choice I made. So I was interviewing for a contractor position, scrum master for two different groups in the same company. And the walk away from the two sets of interviews is that one group was all men talking about technology and how they were bragging about, how they're building the best technology. And the other group was a woman who would be my direct manager and a woman of color who was the squad lead. And it just felt so right to go with working for these two women and supporting with them. And there's so many other things. I have like a lot of white men guilt, but at least to support women in that situation and to deliver up and make sure that they were successful felt like the right thing to do.
Exactly. I mean, and if each one of us thought that way and said, I'm going to make choices that will support that diversity so we can not just be, but actually do something about it, I think our organizations and our Scrum teams would look very different. And that's a beautiful story, Tim. Thank you for sharing.
It's kind of the opposite way of
how
you can affect it.
Yes, absolutely.
So can I share something?
Sure.
So hi everyone. I'm one of Anu's mentees. Like Anu, I came to this country 30 years ago. I'm from Brazil originally, but I've always been extremely independent, and I've never thought that I couldn't do something. Right? I grew up in a household where I was always taught that I could achieve whatever I wanted. And I think that that's something that's very important that we do for our daughters or our kids in general. It doesn't matter, really, right? And I think that that's one of the things that I think may be missing too in society, right? We still have places in the world where women are not seen as human beings who can achieve the same things as men, right? So I think that that's one of the things that needs to change. But when it comes, I know Anu very well, of course, and when it comes to Anu and I think that we're doing such a great job, teaching our daughters that they can be whatever they can be. That even if there are these issues that that people see out in the corporate world, and I'm lucky, I've never been discriminated against for being Latin American or for being a woman. At least I've never felt that way because I've always fought for what I wanted, and I want my daughters to do the same in whatever it is that they go into. So. Of course, there is disparity and there are issues, right? We all know that, but I also think that, it would be helpful if we stepped away from the victim mentality too sometimes, right? And let those things impact us and tell us that we can't do something, right? Always, we always have to believe that we can do it and fight for it. It may be harder than it is for a white man, for example, right? But I think that we really need to fight for the things that we want, and that we have to teach our daughters to do the same.
Absolutely. I tell my girls all the time, don't say I can't do it unless you've done it. And then the only thing I want to hear is, what did you learn from not doing it well? That's it.
One thought I had, and this is from catching the previous, whoever it was who interviewed as a contractor, and the thought is, well, they could, the contractors were all men, but suppose you're mentoring a woman who they want to code, they want to develop, they want to get into senior design positions, because the unspoken thing was to be pointing them for the C-suite.
Mm-hmm.
And well, suppose they want to do that. They want to make these groups of developers and architects and so on more diverse. So suppose one of your mentees has no interest in the C-suite and wants to be an architect. Would you point her away because the statistics say you got to get them? The measure is who gets to the C-suite?
By golly, then she's going to be the best architect on the planet. That's my goal.
Yeah.
Tell me what you want to be. What's your goal?
Yeah.
My job as your mentor is to make sure I can help you get there. And if it means, I don't want to be a C-suite person. I know a bunch of people who say, I never want to be a senior leader. I love my coding. I want to be an architect. Wonderful. We need more women there too.
Mm-hmm.
We need more diversity there. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Folks, a quick time check. Anu is 8:10. And before I actually share my own contribution. I just wanted to alert you that it's 8:10, and I don't know how much time you were allocating for questions.
I just told the organizing committee that my family is having Chinese food today, and I need to step away by 8:30. Otherwise, there will be no Chinese food left for me.
Everyone.
Oh, just my younger daughter is back from college, so food disappears in like massive quantities, and you're like, wait, what happened? So I just need to get there in time to get some lo mein. That's it.
All right. And I guess that my contribution to the topic today is a question because I feel that to some degree, a news message is kind of like preaching to the choir. I see a bunch of educated people here in this forum, and we are aware at home. I grew up in Latin America, and I do most of the cooking at home. And uh, our our children, I've been working from home for the last 8, maybe 10 years. And so my children see a lot of the sort of uh, traditional household. But how do we, this group, how do we folks who are aware of the gap, how do we promote, how do we mobilize the entire communities? How do we, the group have more bias? Are there any tools, any tips other than modeling the behavior that we'd like to accomplish? So any insight, any pointer will be appreciated for me.
I think it's modeling the behavior, it's mentoring, it's coaching, it's opening doors, it's talking to people and saying, so what do you want to be? And just having those conversations. But, I think there as a community, if we decided to collect, if each one of us said, I am going to mentor one person up, that, that's it. Commit to mentoring one person in 2021. One. And all you ask is that they in turn mentor somebody else. Exponential goodness will flow.
Thank you.
I have a question for Anu, and perhaps Phyllis will have a comment also. I've read that as a consequence of the Me Too movement, some men are reluctant to form mentor relationships with women for fear that the proximity of working together closely might result in accusations of sexual harassment. I was wondering if either you, Anu, or Phyllis have seen such an effect.
I have. I actually have a fellow coach who actually works with men to help them deal with um, this innate fear that exists now, which is I don't want to mentor women because if I have lunch with you or coffee with you, it may be misconstrued later. Um, and I think that exists out there. And for me, this actually came up in a leadership class I was doing recently, where I was talking about how do we grow more leaders. And one of the gentlemen in my class said, "Well, I'm just petrified of the Me Too movement. I'm not going to mentor any women. I'm just going to be upfront." And I mean, my heart broke there. And what I told him was, I said, if you want to mentor somebody, I will promise to be in every mentoring session you have with this woman. I will step out of my coaching class if I have to, my coaching sessions. I will work my schedule until you are comfortable. There is no magic bullet that can fix that. None. We need to just be more compassionate, have empathy, and say, how can I help with this? For me, what I did was I offered up my time to this person and said, when you are mentoring a woman, you want me to be in there? I'll be there as a neutral party. Is that a good thing? No, it isn't. nobody should be scared to mentor anybody else for any reason. But the fear exists. And as a woman, that was the only option I could think of on the spur of the moment. But Phyllis, if you have other ideas, I'm all ears.
I actually wanted to, David, that's a great question, but I actually kind of wanted to turn it around again because I'm a little bit older now and there's so many young people. I have millennial daughters. So, and I was assigned, I was a part of a mentoring program. I was on the mentoring committee at one of my former companies, and I was assigned a young man. And
Hmm.
so that was very interesting. At first, I was like, I don't know if I want to do this. So obviously, we made sure that we met in public places,
Yeah, yeah,
and we would meet in the cafeteria. I mean, he ended up being like my son, but I was a little nervous as a older, mature woman, with this young man, and it worked out fine, very structured.
yeah,
And we did a lot over the video chat and all that too. This is before COVID, so I would just say I think it goes both ways.
yeah.
Because women can be accused too. So something to think about.
Exactly. And I think it's every situation is different. For me, I've gone into organizations where like I a simple thing I had a manager years ago, and he was we were traveling, we were visiting another client, and we there were about three of us and our manager. um so the other two were men, and they had dinner plans, and there was this other woman from a different group. My manager asked her and I if we want to go for dinner, and we said yeah, sure. And then she backed out because she had to do something, so my manager canceled dinner with me. And I called him out. I said, why? We still have to eat. He goes, no, I'm not comfortable going out to dinner just with you. I'm like, why? You've known me for 10 years. What? And he goes, just drop it. I'm like, all right, okay. And then another time something happened, and there was another woman joining it, and we went for dinner. I actually sat down with him and I said, tell me, what was this all about? Have I ever done anything to make you feel uncomfortable? He goes, no, no, it's not you. It's the world. If I take you out to dinner
Right.
alone, yeah, people are going to say, ooh, what's he doing taking her out to dinner? I'm like, really?
I guess I would like to add to that, Anu, because I was a single woman with 3 children coming up through the ranks. And the issues for me as I began to travel was not so much the men, but their wives. And their wives saying, you're traveling with her? You're going
Yeah,
out with a woman? And it was the last thing on my mind. It was like I had a job to do. I
yeah,
was in the technical world, and
yeah,
that's what my life was about.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Great point. Great point there. See, this is what I mean. We cannot solve this problem alone. We have to work together. You want to solve all these issues about the Me Too movement, gender parity, race, diversity issues. We need to work together as people.
Anu, can I make one quick comment?
Absolutely.
I think what someone mentioned about having, and this was such a great conversation. Thank you so much. I've learned so much from this about having, the mentors of color. I have to say, as a woman of color, I've benefited more from having a white dude as my mentor because sometimes there's some inside things that I don't know,
Mm,
that I have learned a great deal from having white men as mentors, as well as women and people of color too.
yeah,
But I think don't discount the value that you could add to a person of color because you might be able to give them some thoughts about some communication, interaction.
mm,
I'm not a big sports person, but I've learned to talk sports when I need to. You know, I've learned to how to stand and sit and do things that make men comfortable. And only a guy could tell me that. So I just wanted to say that you have a lot to offer, and you'd be surprised how much that would help a person in their career.
and a great, fantastic point, Phyllis. Just so you know, my one of my mentors on my certified Scrum trainer journey was white man. He's my age, so he's now old white man now, same as my age. So, but it's just without his help, I wouldn't be where I am. Yeah. What? Are we not allowed to talk about the Red Sox? Because they're not doing too well.
Wait, did they play this year?
Not at all. They came in last place after a horrid season. It
Oh,
was a white dude. I suggest you don't talk about them.
done.
See, that's the inside information we need.
Yes, exactly. Note to self: do not talk about Red Sox. Okay. Any other questions? Otherwise, I'm gonna go hit my lo mein. Well, thank you very much. Like I said, I'm going to send a PDF of my slides. I'll send that on to Pepe and the organizers, and you'll have access to that. My contact information is on there. I'm on LinkedIn. Look me up. I never told anybody this. I live just outside of Philadelphia, so I forgot to mention that. But when travel restrictions are lifted, if you're in the Philly area, give me a shout out. I'll be happy to come hang out with you. And we love my family and my husband and I love Boston. And we are Red Sox fans. So we love Fenway Park. So if I ever come to Boston, I'll look you guys up and maybe I can come in and whenever restrictions are lifted, meet with all of you in person. That would be wonderful. See you guys.
Thank you, Anu.
I hope to connect with many of you over social media. Phyllis, I look forward to catching up with you. I think there's just a lot of work that you're doing. I find there'll be lots of synergy. Anybody else, like I said, my promise to you is you reach out to me. If I can't help you, I will connect you to somebody or find you a path forward somehow. That is my promise to you. So thank you very much. Have a wonderful, wonderful evening. Have a safe and happy holidays, whatever you celebrate, and wish you the best of luck in 2021.